Hi everyone, thank you so much for joining me. My name is Kristen and today I am bringing you my final thoughts for my May 2024 currently inked pens. The first pen and ink pairing is the Aurora 88 Volterra with an extra fine nib, and it was inked up with Aurora Sepia, one of my bottled inks. Here's the writing sample for that pen and ink pairing. This pen has that signature Aurora feedback, and since it's an extra fine nib, that feedback is much more pronounced. I wasn't always in the mood to feel that much texture in my writing, but I still enjoyed using this pen and ink pairing. I don't think there will ever be a day that I just hate brown pens and brown inks in general. Brown is such a rich and comforting color to me, so despite the extra feedback that I get in this extra fine nib, I really did enjoy this pairing. Okay, this is my Sailor 1911 large, black luster. It has a medium nib, and it was inked up with Herbin Terre de Feu. I am not fond of this ink color. It does walk a very fine line between pink and brown, and this ink reminds me of Terre Guitar Opera Rose, which is why I've decided to just pass this one along to a friend instead of keeping it. The pen is another story. I absolutely love this smooth medium nib. A viewer commented on my initial thoughts video saying that Sailor's coated nibs are much smoother than their uncoated ones. I suspected as much, but it's still nice to have that tentative thought confirmed by someone else. This is my Pelikan M800 brown black. It has a broad cursive italic nib, and I have this one inked up with Diamine Fireside Snug. This pen and ink pairing surprised me. Whenever I inked up this pen in the past, I was drawn to it always. I even created reasons to use it throughout the day. This month, however, the M800 sat unused for days at a time. Diamine Fireside Snug is a color that I'd rather have in my wardrobe than put on stark white paper. So this broad nibbed pen with a bold orange ink actually became my favorite pen to use for headers rather than journal entries. All right, next is my Hongdian C1 in dark green. It's got an extra fine hooded nib, and it was inked up with Birmingham pen company Lichen. First, I loved this pen. Then I hated it. Then I loved it again. The first thing I loved about this pen was the impossibly stiff extra fine nib. I didn't have to worry about whether or not I was pressing too hard on such a thin, narrow piece of metal. But then I started to hate the pen because I could never tell if I was rotating it while I was writing. My only clue was that the pen started drying out, writing drier whenever I rotated the nib away from its sweet spot. Finally, I began to love this pen again because I had a very specific use for it. I started learning Japanese about 3 weeks ago, and this was my go-to pen for practicing one of the Japanese writing systems. These are some of my first attempts. Please don't make fun of me. I'm still learning. Next is Wearingeul Tom Sawyer in my Sailor 1911 Realo Champagne. This pen has a medium nib. I don't know. This is a lovely ink color, and I find myself admiring this writing sample. I also find myself wishing that I had a deeper, richer ink color, something that was more lubricated in this Realo. This pen and ink pairing performed well, and I don't remember encountering any issues. But that's the thing, I barely remember my writing experiences with this pen. It was forgettable. The pen has that signature Sailor feedback, but beyond that, there is really nothing more to say. This is my Montegrappa Elmo Marshmallow. It has an extra fine nib, and it's inked up with Octopus Fluids Dragon. This is a pen and ink pairing that does not need to remain unused in a pen for long stretches of time. This thick, sheening ink had dried out in my extra fine nib. I had to scribble a little bit on some scrap paper at the beginning of this writing session. But once the ink flowed freely again and the pen was back to its normal wet writing state, the sheen was super heavy. There we go. The sheen was super heavy at the beginning of the session and evened out about halfway through. So it's pretty strong up here, and then it's pretty typical towards the end. This is my Edison Premier Dragoness. It has a medium nib, and it's inked up with Diamine Blizzard. This was the perfect pen and ink pairing. They matched so well, like they were just made for each other. The shimmer sparkled throughout the entire writing session. Every time. Everywhere. Oh, I love that so much. This is really nice. This pen and ink pairing performed so well that I would not be opposed to reserving Diamine Blizzard just for this fountain pen. The writing felt so smooth that it was pretty close to feeling like a non-shimmer ink flowing from this pen. It was amazing. This is my Pilot Vanishing Point in matte black. It's got a fine nib. and it was inked up with Aurora Turquoise. I am ready to let go of this ink. The writing experience was maybe a step up from my experience with Wearingeul Sawyer in the Sailor Realo. This pairing was pleasant. It was smooth, it was reliable, and I'm sure this combination would excite someone else. There are a few ink colors that I wish that I could enjoy more, and turquoise is one of them. So because of my own color preferences, this pen and ink pairing was just okay. Here is my Visconti Kaleido Unicorn Galaxy. It has a fine cursive italic nib. It was inked up with Pilot Iroshizuku Ajisai. This pen and ink pairing incited mixed emotions within me. I really enjoy the pen. Specifically, the nib is one of my favorites in my collection, and I enjoy it every time I use it. But this month, I realized that there is ink seeping into the translucent section of this pen and sometimes onto my fingers. And I hate the stark contrast of this dark purplish blue against the soft colors of the pen. And I'm starting to accept the fact that this ink is just not purple enough for me, and I don't want to keep it in my collection. Aside from that, the physical writing experience was a pleasant one. This is my Esterbrook JR Beleza. It's got an extra fine nib. It's inked up with Octopus Fluid's Medusa. This was very often my EDC or my everyday carry for the month of May. I love using this pen with my Passport TN. It's compact enough for my pen loop, and it writes well enough for a flawless start every time, even with the sheen in here. It doesn't show up as much on Midori paper as it does on Tomoe River, but I really prefer this purple ink without the green sheen. Let me bring this closer for you. Because it seemed that the pen started to dry out about halfway through this writing session, but then it picked right back up without any additional prompting from me. So I'm not sure what happened here. Down here in this wetter area, it actually bled through to the other page. Next is the Esterbrook Estie and Lilac. It has an extra fine nib, and it's inked up with Tom's Studio Damson. This pen and ink pairing was underwhelming. It performed well, but this is not one of my favorites for the month. It may be due to the ink color being slightly more red than the pen body. So if I can bring that closer to you, this is more of a berry color, and that's more of a, I don't know, a bluish violet purple. So it may be due to the ink color being slightly more red than the pen body, or just slightly red in general. I'd like to figure out whether or not I like this particular color in a wider nib, or if I just prefer cooler tone purples in general, like Octopus Fluid's Medusa. Last but not least is my Twisby Eco in Smoke Rose Gold. It has a medium nib, and it's inked up with Wearingeul Anubis. Anubis is a warm gray ink with a coppery gold shimmer. I don't even know if I can show it to you right now. I really enjoyed writing with this pen, and this writing experience was just as smooth as my Edison Premier fountain pen. But upon closer inspection, I've realized that Anubis is an interesting ink. I can spot the shimmer under ambient light, but not directly under a lamp. I cannot spot the shimmer in natural light, like next to a window, but it is almost blinding in direct sunlight. This behavior reminds me of 3 dominant industry inks that baffled me in the same way last year: Le Nuage, Horizon, and Matin. The difference with this one is that I actually like the base color, and the shimmer is more visible in general. Okay, so now that we have taken a look at all of the writing samples, I'd like to rank these fountain pen and ink pairings from my most favorite to least. First place goes to my Edison Premier Dragoness. It was a positive, a wonderful experience overall. I love the ink, I love the pen, and they just matched so well with each other. Next is my Aurora Volterra. This one took second place only because sometimes I just wasn't in the mood to experience that Aurora feedback. Third is my Sailor 1911 Large Black Luster. It was a great writing experience, but I just did not enjoy the ink color. Fourth is the Montegrappa Elmo and Marshmallow. It was a great writing experience, but it dried out just a bit. Next is the Esterbrook JR Beleza. It was a great writing experience and a wonderful everyday carry fountain pen. Number 6 is the Twisby Eco Smoke Rose Gold. It was a great ink, but I think I preferred all 5 of these writing experiences above this one. Number 7 is the Visconti Kaleido Unicorn Galaxy. It's a great fountain pen, great writing experience. I just didn't like the color of the ink or the fact that this happened. Next, number 8 is the Esterbrook Estie Lilac. I was just underwhelmed by the ink color. Number 9, surprise, surprise, is the Pelikan M800 in brown black. I love this fountain pen, but I just did not love the ink. Number 10 is the Pilot Vanishing Point in matte black with Aurora Turquoise. It's a great pen, feels really good in my hands. I just didn't like the ink. The Hongdian C1 dark green is number 11. It's a nice fountain pen, very stiff, extra fine nib, and it has a very specific use case for me. Number 12 is the Sailor 1911 Realo in champagne or champagne green. It's a great writing fountain pen. I just wish I had another ink in there. The pen and ink pairing that you don't see here is my Platinum 3776 Century Chenonceau with a soft fine nib. It was inked up with Diamine Cinnabon. I did not enjoy the feedback on this nib this month, and I didn't want to take a gamble on whether or not the ink would feather in my day-to-day writing. So I cleaned out the pen pretty soon after my initial thoughts video. So if you want this one to be ranked among the other fountain pens, it is number 13. So I learned a pretty simple lesson this month. The ink color is just as important as ink performance for me. This may not be true for you, but the color of an ink can make or break a good writing experience for me. Case in point, the Pelikan M800 Brown Black is one of my favorite fountain pens, and it is in 9th place this month. Did you learn anything about yourself this month? Big revelations or small ones? I'd love to hear from you. Thank you so much for joining me, and I hope you have a great day. I'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye.